You click to discover the emperor who lasted 7 months, and in the next few minutes, we're uncovering the swift, brutal downfall of Galba, Rome's first ruler after Nero. Get ready for a lesson in how quickly power can vanish. After Nero's suicide plunged Rome into chaos, a respected general named Galba emerged, seemingly a savior. But his reign was barely a blink. Our source for this rapid rise and fall? Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars, revealing the fatal errors that ended his brief time on the throne. How could an experienced leader lose control of an empire in just 7 months? What critical mistakes did he make that cost him everything? We'll dive into the ill-fated financial decisions, the fatal choice of an heir, and the ultimate betrayal by his own guards. What specific missteps turned initial hope into bloody revolt? Suetonius provides a minute-by-minute account of ambition, misjudgment, and the ruthless politics that defined the chaotic year of the 4 emperors. If you're fascinated by the brutal realities of Roman power and the dramatic fragility of leadership, you're in the right place. Stick around to uncover Galba's tragic tale. Before we explore his downfall, please hit that like button, share your thoughts on his mistakes in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping stories from antiquity. Servius Sulpicius Galba. The lineage of the Caesars ended with Nero. This event was foretold by various signs, 2 of which were particularly significant. Once, after her marriage to Augustus, Livia visited her villa at Veii. An eagle flew by and dropped a hen, holding a laurel sprig onto her lap. Livia ordered the hen cared for and the laurel sprig planted. The hen raised so many chickens that the villa is still known as the Villa of the Hens. The laurel groves thrived, providing branches and crowns for the Caesars' triumphs. It was also their custom to plant new laurels in the same spot after each triumph. It was observed that the tree planted by each prince would die shortly before his own death. However, in Nero's final year, the entire laurel plantation perished to its roots, and all the hens died. Around the same time, lightning struck the temple of the Caesars. The heads of all the statues fell off at once, and Augustus's scepter was dashed from his hands. Nero was succeeded by Galba, who, though not related to the Caesars, was of noble birth. He descended from an ancient and prominent family, always including his great-grandson status to Q. Catulus Capitolinus among his titles. Upon becoming emperor, he displayed images of his ancestors in the palace hall. Inscriptions traced his father's lineage to Jupiter and his mother's to Pasiphae, wife of Minos. A detailed account of the entire family would be extensive, so we will focus on his direct branch. The origin of the cognomen Galba, for the first Sulpicius to bear it, is uncertain. Some believe it came from his setting fire to a Spanish city with torches dipped in galbanum gum after a long, unsuccessful siege. Others suggest it was due to his use of the gum as a remedy for a lingering illness, wrapped in wool. Still others claim it was because he was extremely corpulent, as such a person was called Galba in Gaulish, or conversely, because he was slender like the insects called galbae that breed in oak trees. Servius Galba, a man of consular rank and the most eloquent of his time, brought renown to the family. History records that as pro-praetor of Spain, he treacherously massacred 30,000 Lusitanians, igniting the War of Viriatus. His grandson, angered at Julius Caesar, whose lieutenant he had been in Gaul, joined the conspiracy against Caesar after being denied the consulship. He was subsequently condemned by the Pedian law. From this line descended the grandfather and father of Emperor Galba. The grandfather was more celebrated for his academic pursuits than for his government service. He rose only to the praetorship but published a substantial and interesting history. His father achieved the consulship. He was a short, hump-backed man but a competent orator and diligent pleader. He married twice, first to Mummia Achaica, daughter of Catulus and great-granddaughter of Lucius Mummius, who sacked Corinth, and second to Livia Ocellina, a wealthy and beautiful woman who reputedly sought him for his noble lineage. It is said she was further encouraged by an incident demonstrating his honesty. When she pressed her suit, he privately removed his toga to reveal his physical deformity, so she would not feel deceived. By Achaia, he had 2 sons, Caius and Sergius. Caius, the elder, significantly reduced his estate, withdrew from public life, and, forbidden by Tiberius from seeking a proconsulship in his year, took his own life. Emperor Sergius Galba was born on December 24th, during the consulship of M. Valerius Messala and C.N. Lentulus. His birthplace was a villa on a hill near Terracina, to the left of the road to Fundi. Adopted by his stepmother, he took the name Livius, with the cognomen Ocella, and changed his praenomen from Sergius to Lucius, which he used until becoming emperor. It is well known that when he, as a boy, paid his respects to Augustus, the emperor pinched his cheek and said, "And you, child, too, will taste our imperial dignity." Tiberius, likewise, upon hearing that Galba would become emperor in old age, exclaimed, "Let him live, then, since that does not concern me." When his grandfather performed a sacrifice to avert an ill omen from lightning, an eagle snatched the victim's entrails from his hand and carried them into an oak tree laden with acorns. The soothsayers declared that the family would control the empire, but not for many years. The grandfather, smiling, replied, "When a mule comes to bear a foal." When Galba first rebelled against Nero, nothing gave him more confidence than a mule unexpectedly foaling at that very time. While others saw it as an inauspicious omen, he alone considered it fortunate, recalling his grandfather's sacrifice and saying, upon assuming the toga virilis, he dreamt that the goddess Fortune told him, "I stand before your door weary. Unless I am quickly admitted, I shall fall into the hands of the first who comes to seize me." Waking, he opened his door to find a bronze statue of the goddess, over a cubit long, by the threshold. He took it with him to Tusculum, where he spent his summers. He consecrated it in a room in his house, thereafter worshipping it with monthly sacrifices and an annual vigil. Even as a young man, he maintained an ancient, obsolete custom, then observed only in his family. His freedmen and slaves would appear before him twice daily, morning and evening, to offer salutations. Among other liberal studies, he applied himself to law. He married Lepida and had 2 sons, but both mother and children died. He remained a widower, refusing to remarry, even Agrippina herself. After Domitius's death left her a widow, Agrippina used all her charms to attract Galba, even while he was married. Lepida's mother once publicly rebuked and even cuffed Agrippina for her advances. Galba most actively courted Empress Livia. Through her favor, while she lived, he gained considerable influence and nearly received a large inheritance from her will. She distinguished him from other legatees with a legacy of 50 million sesterces. However, because the sum was written in figures and not words, her heir, Tiberius, reduced it to 500,000. Galba never received even this reduced amount. He held high offices before the legal age. During his praetorship, at games honoring the goddess Flora, he introduced the novel spectacle of elephants walking on ropes. He then governed Aquitania for nearly a year and soon after became consul in the usual course, holding the position for 6 months. He coincidentally succeeded L. Domitius, Nero's father, and was succeeded by Salvius Otho, father of the emperor of that name. His consulship between the sons of these 2 men seemed to presage his future ascent to the empire. Appointed by Caius Caesar to replace Catulicus in command, the day after joining the legions, he stopped their applause at a public spectacle by ordering, they should keep their hands under their cloaks. Immediately, the following verse became common in the camp. "Learn, soldier, now in arms to use your hands. 'Tis Galba, not Catulicus, commands." With equal strictness, he permitted no petitions for leave of absence. He hardened soldiers, old and young, with constant exercise. After quickly confining barbarians who had encroached into Gaul, He so impressed Caius and his army upon the emperor's arrival in Germany that, among countless troops from all provinces, none received higher commendation or greater rewards. He also distinguished himself by leading an escort with a shield in hand, running alongside the emperor's chariot for 20 miles. Upon hearing of Caius's death, though many urged him to seize the empire, he chose to remain quiet. This earned him great favor with Claudius, who welcomed him among his friends. Claudius held him in such high esteem that the expedition to Britain was delayed because Galba suddenly fell slightly ill. He governed Africa as proconsul for 2 years, chosen out of course to restore order to a province troubled by civil strife and barbarian incursions. His administration was known for its strictness and fairness, even in minor matters. A soldier on an expedition, accused of selling his last bushel of wheat for 100 denarii during a severe corn shortage, was forbidden any relief when he himself became needy and subsequently died of famine. In judgment, when faced with a case over a pack animal claimed by 2 people, with weak evidence on both sides, he ordered the beast led to its usual watering pond with its head muffled. The covering was then removed, and the animal was declared the property of the person it followed willingly after drinking. For his achievements in Africa and previously in Germany, Galba received triumphal ornaments and 3 priestly appointments. One among the 15, another in the College of Titius, and a third among the Augustals. From that time until the middle of Nero's reign, he mostly lived in retirement. He never went out, even for a simple stroll, without a carriage containing 1,000,000 sesterces in gold readily available. Finally, while living in Fundi, he was offered the province of Hispania Tarraconensis. Upon his arrival in the province, as he was sacrificing in a temple, a boy attending with a censer suddenly turned gray-headed. Some interpreted this as a sign of an approaching governmental revolution, predicting that an old man would succeed a young one, that he would succeed Nero. Not long after, a thunderbolt striking a lake in Cantabria revealed 12 axes, a clear symbol of supreme power. He governed the province for 8 years, his administration proving inconsistent and capricious. Initially, he was active, vigorous, and even excessively severe in punishing offenders. For instance, a money dealer who committed fraud had his hands cut off and nailed to his counter. Another man, who poisoned an orphan under his guardianship and was the next heir, was crucified. When this criminal pleaded for the protection of law, crying out that he was a Roman citizen, Galba, feigning leniency and a desire to mitigate punishment with honor, ordered a cross taller than usual and painted white to be erected for him. However, he gradually succumbed to indolence and inactivity, fearing to provoke Nero's jealousy. As he used to say, nobody was obliged to render an account of their leisure hours. He was presiding over a court on circuit in New Carthage when he received news of the insurrection in Gaul. While the lieutenant of Aquitania sought his assistance, letters arrived from Vindex, urging him to assert the rights of mankind, and put himself at their head to relieve them from the tyranny of Nero. Without long hesitation, Galba accepted the invitation, driven by both fear and hope. He had discovered that Nero had sent secret orders to his procurators in the province to have him assassinated. He was also encouraged by several omens and the prophecy of a well-born young woman. This was further bolstered when the priest of Jupiter at Clunia, guided by a dream, discovered verses in the temple's depths similar to her prophecy. These verses had also been uttered by a divinely inspired girl about 200 years prior. Their meaning was that in time Spain should give the world a lord and master. Taking his seat on the tribunal, as if the only business was the manumission of slaves, he displayed effigies of many people condemned and executed by Nero. A noble youth, whom he had purposely sent for from the Balearic Isles after his banishment, stood by. Lamenting the state of the times, Galba was unanimously hailed as emperor. He publicly declared himself only the lieutenant of the Senate and people of Rome. Then, closing the courts, he levied legions and auxiliary troops from the provincials, in addition to his veteran army of 1 legion, 2 cavalry wings, and 3 cohorts. From the most experienced and prudent military leaders, he formed a kind of senate to advise him on all important matters as needed. He also selected several young men of equestrian rank, granting them the privilege of wearing the gold ring. Called the Reserve, they guarded his bedchamber instead of legionary soldiers. He issued proclamations across the empire's provinces, exhorting everyone to unite and aid the common cause by all available means. Around the same time, while fortifying a town he chose as a military post, an antique ring was found. Its stone was engraved with the goddess Victory holding a trophy. Soon after, an Alexandrian ship arrived at Dertosa, laden with arms, without a helmsman, sailor, or passenger. From this incident, no one doubted that the impending war was just, honorable, and divinely favored. However, the entire plan was suddenly jeopardized. One of the 2 cavalry wings, regretting their oath to Nero, attempted to desert upon his approach to the camp and were only with difficulty kept in line. Also, some slaves, presented to him by a freedman of Nero's specifically to murder him, nearly succeeded as he passed through a narrow passage to the bath. Overheard encouraging each other not to miss the opportunity, they were interrogated, and torture extracted a confession. These dangers were followed by Vindex's death, which deeply disheartened Galba. Feeling abandoned by fortune, he considered ending his own life. But then, messengers from Rome brought news that Nero was dead and that all had sworn allegiance to him as emperor. He then dropped the title of lieutenant and assumed that of Caesar. Setting out in his general's cloak with a dagger hanging from his neck across his chest, he did not resume wearing the toga until Nymphidius Sabinus, prefect of the Praetorian Guards in Rome, along with the 2 lieutenants, Fonteius Capito in Germany and Claudius Macer in Africa, who had opposed his advancement, were all suppressed. Rumors of his cruelty and avarice reached the city before his arrival. It was said that he had punished some Spanish and Gallic cities for their slow support by imposing heavy taxes and leveling walls. Governors and procurators, with their wives and children, were reportedly put to death. Also, a 15-pound golden crown, taken from the temple of Jupiter and presented by the people of Tarracona, was reportedly melted down, and he exacted 3 ounces for the missing weight. This report was confirmed and amplified upon his entry into the city. He forced some seamen, whom Nero had taken from the fleet and enlisted among the troops, to return to their former condition. When they refused, clinging stubbornly to the more honorable service under their eagles and standards, he not only dispersed them with cavalry but also decimated them. He also disbanded a cohort of Germans, formed by previous emperors as a bodyguard and often found very faithful, sending them back to their country without gratuity. He claimed they were more inclined to support Gnaeus Dolabella, near whose gardens they were encamped, than himself. The following ridiculous stories were also told about him, though their veracity is unknown, that when a more lavish meal than usual was served, he let out a deep groan, that when a steward presented an account of his expenses, Galba gave him a dish of legumes from his table as a reward for his diligence, and that when Canis the piper played to his satisfaction, Galba personally handed him 5 denarii from his pocket. His arrival in the city was therefore not well received by the people, a fact evident at the next public spectacle. When actors in a farce began a well-known song, "Lo! Clodpate from his village comes," all the spectators, with one voice, continued, repeating and acting the first verse multiple times. He acquired imperial power with more popular favor and authority than he exercised it. Although he gave many proofs of being an excellent prince, these were not as appreciated as his misconduct was offensive. He was controlled by 3 favorites, who, living in the palace and constantly at his side, earned the name his pedagogues. These were Titus Vinius, his lieutenant in Spain, a man of insatiable avarice; Cornelius Laco, who advanced from an assessor to the prince to prefect of the Praetorian Guards, a person of intolerable arrogance and indolence; and his freedman Icelus, recently granted the privilege of wearing the gold ring and the cognomen Martianus, who aimed for the highest honor an equestrian could reach. Galba surrendered so completely to the power of these three favorites, who governed everything according to their capricious vices and temperaments, that his authority was gravely abused. His conduct was thus inconsistent, at times more rigorous and frugal, at others more lavish and negligent than befitting a prince chosen by the people and so advanced in years. He condemned some men of the highest rank in the senatorial and equestrian orders on very slight suspicion and without trial. He rarely granted Roman citizenship and the privilege for those with 3 children only to 1 or 2, and then with great difficulty and for a limited time. When judges petitioned for a 6th decury to be added to their number, he not only refused but abolished the winter and early year vacation granted to them by Claudius. It was also thought that he intended to reduce the terms of offices held by senators and equestrians to 2 years and to bestow them only on those unwilling to accept them. He recalled all of Nero's grants, saving only 1/10 of their value. For this purpose, he commissioned 50 Roman knights, ordering that if players or wrestlers had sold what they were given, the value should be exacted from the purchasers, as the original recipients, having undoubtedly spent the money, were unable to pay. On the other hand, he allowed his attendants and freedmen to sell or give away state revenue or tax immunities, and to punish the innocent or pardon criminals at will. Indeed, when the Roman people loudly demanded the punishment of Helotus and Tigellinus, 2 of Nero's most notorious agents, he protected them, even bestowing upon Helotus one of his best procurations. As for Tigellinus, he even reprimanded the people for their cruelty in a proclamation. This conduct earned him the hatred of all social orders, especially the soldiery. Their commanders had promised a larger than usual donative in his name when they swore allegiance before his arrival in Rome. However, he refused to honor it, frequently boasting that it was his custom to choose his soldiers, not buy them. This exasperated troops everywhere. He alarmed the Praetorian guards with fears of danger and mistreatment, occasionally disbanding many as disloyal and supporters of Nymphidius. Most of all, the army in Upper Germany was enraged, feeling defrauded of rewards due for their service in the Gaulish insurrection under Vindex. They were the first to openly mutiny, refusing to swear allegiance to anyone but the Senate on January 1st. They immediately sent deputies to the Praetorian troops, stating they did not like the emperor who had been set up in Spain, and asking them to choose another, who might meet with the approbation of all the armies. Upon receiving this intelligence, Galba, imagining he was slighted not so much for his age as for having no children, immediately chose Piso Frugi Licinianus from a group of young men of rank who came to pay their respects. Piso was of noble descent and great talent, and Galba had previously designated him heir to his estate and name in his will. Galba now called him his son, took him to the camp, and adopted him in the presence of the assembled troops, but without mentioning a donative. This circumstance provided a better opportunity for Marcus Salvius Otho to achieve his objective, just 6 days after the adoption. Many remarkable prodigies had occurred from the very beginning of Galba's reign, forewarning him of his approaching fate. In every town he passed through on his way from Spain to Rome, victims were sacrificed on both sides of the roads. One bull, maddened by the axe's blow, broke its rope and charged straight at his chariot, its 4 feet elevated, splattering him with blood. Likewise, as he was dismounting, a guard, pushed forward by the crowd, very nearly wounded him with his lance. Upon his entry into the city and then the palace, he was greeted by an earthquake and a noise like the bellowing of cattle. These ill omens were followed by even more apparent ones. From his treasures, he had selected a pearl and jewel necklace to adorn his statue of Fortune at Tusculum. But it suddenly occurred to him that it deserved a more august place, so he consecrated it to the Capitoline Venus. The next night, he dreamt that Fortune appeared, complaining she had been defrauded of her intended gift and threatening to reclaim what she had given him. Terrified, at daybreak, He sent people ahead to Tusculum to prepare a sacrifice to avert the goddess's displeasure. When he himself arrived, he found nothing but hot embers on the altar and an old man in black standing by, holding a little incense in a glass and some wine in an earthen pot. It was also noted that while he was sacrificing on January 1st, his chaplet fell from his head, and when he consulted the pullets for omens, they flew away. Furthermore, on the day of Piso's adoption, when he was to address the soldiers, his customary seat was not placed on his tribunal due to his attendants' negligence. In the Senate House, his curule chair was set facing backward. The day before he was slain, as he sacrificed in the morning, the augur repeatedly warned him to be on guard, for he was in danger from assassins close at hand. Soon after, he was informed that Otho held the Praetorian camp. Though most friends advised him to go there immediately, hoping his authority and presence might quell the tumult, he resolved only to remain within the palace, securing himself with guards of legionary soldiers quartered around the city. He put on a linen coat of mail, remarking at the same time that it would avail him little against so many sword points. However, tempted out by false reports purposely spread by conspirators to induce him to venture abroad, some few around him too hastily assuring him that the tumult had ceased, the mutineers were apprehended, and the rest were coming to congratulate him, resolved to remain firm in their obedience. He went forward to meet them with such confidence that when a soldier boasted of killing Otho, Galba asked him, "By what authority?" He proceeded as far as the Forum. There, the knights appointed to dispatch him, making their way through the crowd, saw him at a distance and halted briefly. Then, galloping up to him, now abandoned by all his attendants, they put him to death. Some authors relate that upon their first approach, he cried out, "What do you mean, fellow soldiers? I am yours and you are mine," and promised them a donative. But most writers say he offered his throat to them, saying, "Do your work and strike since you are resolved upon it." It is remarkable that not one of those at hand attempted to assist the emperor, and all who were summoned disregarded the call, except a troop of Germans. They, remembering his recent kindness in showing them particular attention during a sickness in the camp, rushed to his aid but arrived too late. Unfamiliar with the city, they had taken a circuitous route. He was slain near the Curtian lake and left there until a common soldier, returning from receiving his corn allowance, threw down his load and cut off Galba's head. As there was no hair to grasp, he hid it in his clothing, but then thrusting his thumb into the mouth, he carried it in that manner to Otho, who gave it to the drudges and slaves attending the soldiers. They, fixing it on a spear point, carried it in derision around the camp, crying out, "You take your fill of joy in your old age." They were spurred to this rude banter by a report spread a few days earlier that, upon someone praising his person as still florid and vigorous, he had replied, "My strength as yet has suffered no decay." A freedman of Petrobius, who himself had belonged to Nero's household, purchased the head for 100 gold pieces and threw it into the place where, by Galba's order, his patron had been executed. Finally, after some time, his steward Argius buried it with the rest of his body in his own gardens near the Aurelian Way. In person, Galba was of good size, bald in front, with blue eyes and an aquiline nose. His hands and feet were so distorted by gout that he could neither wear a shoe, turn book pages, nor even hold a book. He also had an excrescence on his right side that hung down so much it was difficult to keep up with a bandage. He is reported to have been a great eater, usually taking his breakfast before daybreak in winter. At supper, he ate very heartily, giving handfuls of leftover fragments to his attendants. In his desires, he was more inclined to males, particularly older ones. It is said that in Spain, when Icelus, an old catamite of his, brought him news of Nero's death, Galba not only kissed him lovingly in company but begged him to remove all impediments, then took him aside into a private apartment. Galba perished in the 73rd year of his age and the 7th month of his reign. The Senate, as soon as it could safely do so, ordered a statue erected for him on the naval column in the Forum where he was slain. But Vespasian cancelled the decree, suspecting Galba had sent assassins from Spain to Judea to murder him. As a private man, Galba was the wealthiest of any who had aspired to imperial dignity. He prided himself on his descent from the Servii family, but even more on his relation to Quintus Catullus Capitolinus, celebrated for integrity and virtue. He was also distantly related to Livia, Augustus's wife, by whose influence he was promoted from his palace position to the dignity of consul, and who left him a large legacy upon her death. His frugal lifestyle and aversion to all superfluity were construed as avarice once he became emperor. Hence, Plutarch observes that the pride he took in his temperance and economy was ill-timed. While he tried to reform the lavish public spending prevalent in Nero's reign, he swung to the opposite extreme. Some historians criticize him for failing to maintain the imperial dignity in a manner consistent with even basic decency. He was insufficiently attentive to both his own security and the tranquility of the state when he refused to pay the soldiers the donative he had promised. This breach of faith seems to be the only act in his life that truly affects his integrity, and it contributed more to his ruin than even the odium he incurred by the open venality and rapaciousness of his favorites, particularly Vinius.